All right, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. And actually, today is a very, very special episode to me. I am going to introduce to you all a fellow podcaster who started the podcast titled My Valley, His Victory. And as you all know, over the past year, 2024, I have shared with you all my faith. I have shared with you all some of my lowest moments, um, recovering from a foot surgery that went wrong. And as a podcaster, I am always looking for new podcasts to listen to, new people that are showing up in this space and doing things right. And this year, along my journey, I found the My Valley, His Victory podcast, and the host of that show is Kenzie Smith. And Kenzie is here with me today, and she is going to go raw and tell us why she started this podcast and why it should be an additional show added to your playlist. So let's get right to it. Kenzie, welcome to the show.
Hey, Julie. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here. Always a little nervous being on the other side of this, but excited nonetheless.
Yeah, we're going to have a good show, and I'm glad you're here. And I'm actually glad you started your podcast because I'm always looking for, as a fellow podcaster, I'm always researching and looking for additional shows I can listen to, ways people do things. And on my journey in 2024 of really not being afraid to share my faith and my belief in God and coming out of the other side of this injury, I'm not even quite sure how I found your podcast. I'm not sure if you just popped up. Could have been divine intervention, is what I believe. So let's get right to it. So, My Valley, His Victory. You are almost a year into producing your own show. So, Kenzie, give us a little bit of your background and what led you to starting your own venture with this podcasting thing.
Yeah. So, it's always interesting. I don't know quite where to start, but I'll give you the short version. We can go into whatever part of it you want. But I have a really crazy testimony in how I came to know the Lord. God worked a huge miracle in my life that I'm just forever grateful for, but that wasn't always the case. I really struggled with a season of that miracle for a long time. And I was I'll say atheist agnostic. I don't know if I quite had enough faith to say I was full-blown atheist, but wasn't sure that there was, anything out there, that anything in life really meant much, and hit a really low point in my life. And, God just miraculously worked through that. And I became a believer at the age of 25. I'm 30 now, so it's been about 5 years, and really had a lot of shame around my story and kind of how I came to know the Lord. And so it's really interesting. You would think it was this big life-saving moment, and I was so happy about it. And while, yes, I was internally, it wasn't something that I wanted to share with anyone else. And so all last year, I just feel like God was tapping me on the shoulder saying, hey, Kenzie, like, you've had your time. It's been 4 years at that time. I need you to share your story, but from the opposite perspective. So you had all this shame, you had all this, fear of people knowing what happened to you, but I really did a huge miracle in your story. And I need you to bring glory to that part of it and kind of set your pride aside and your want to appear a certain way to people. I also tell people I'm a recovering people pleaser, and
Oh,
I
wow.
um just want to be I always wanted to be someone for someone else. Like, I didn't want to share my problems or my things. I just wanted to be that person for other people. So long story short, I reached out to a guy on Instagram who runs a Christian Outdoors podcast, Pete Rogers. And I was like, hey, I, at that time, had just started a blog called Messages from the Mountain. And I was like, hey, I would love to share about my blog, and I would love to share about my story on your podcast. And this is like a really big podcast. And I for sure thought, no way that I would be a guest on this podcast. But lo and behold, he responds. He's like, I think you'd be a perfect fit. And now reality sets in, like, okay, I actually have to do this now. And I have to share my story. And so I shared my story on his podcast. Once it came out, I just received the most overwhelming positivity. People were like, thank you so much for sharing your story. Like, this is not things that people talk about. And it just seemed like there was a need that I know I needed in my season, and that other people needed as well, which is to hear the things that are true about Christianity, that are your walk with God is not going to always be smooth. And you're not, once you follow God, you're not just going to have this awesome life and everything's just going to go well all the time. The Bible actually tells us that we will struggle and there will be struggle in that. And it's actually really hard to walk faithfully and be a Christian. And so, after receiving all that response, I was just like, how can I create a platform for other people to share their journeys and their struggles and their valleys that they have gone through in their life, but then talk about it from the perspective of, but this is what God did with that. And so there was a purpose to my pain, even though I didn't love the pain. And in that season, I couldn't see the end of the tunnel. And I was like, what in the world is going on? You know, hindsight's 2020, but like, let's talk about that part and how God used your valley for his victory. So.
And there you are. Thus the name of your show, My Valley, His Victory. And I was actually just recently on your podcast. It just released. By the time this show comes out, you all will be able to go over there and really hear my testimony on your show. And I truly appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity to really kind of get more raw. And it took going on your show for me to do that, because my show, my platform is all about hiking, all about section hiking, being in the outdoors. And what I have found over the last year of me, kind of going through my own journey and, kind of the listeners hearing my journey, but not the real truth, until this past year, like how low I got, how depressed I got, um, and what it took, to get me out of that valley. And to parallel with your show, so you've taken the world of Christianity and you've combined it with the outdoors. And I'm going to call you a very rugged outdoors person, because when I was listening to your testimony on the podcast, what was the name of that show? Tell me the name of that show again. Where
It's
you
just
went
Christian Outdoors Podcast.
Christian Outdoors Podcast. You're actually really into, or you were into overlanding. But before we get into that, you met your husband in Yosemite National Park. And on the Christian Outdoors Podcast, you talked about it, but you did not go in depth. So I want you to go more in depth, because I think that is so awesome. Because part of your story is I mean, you had a terrible relationship, and that took you down in this valley, and things happened to you that shouldn't happen. And you were out of this, and when you went to Yosemite, you were not looking for your husband, so to speak. So kind of take us from there, and I'd love to hear the whole thing.
Yeah. Real quick before we jump into that, I just want to say I left a part out about my podcast that, I want to cover real fast, and that is the outdoors piece. And so when I was looking at starting my podcast, I'm a huge outdoors person, as you just mentioned. And so for me, it was really important to combine the two and to be able to step in that space being fully authentic. And so what I do is I incorporate the outdoors in a lot of what I do, because one of the biggest things that I had a hard time when I came into Christianity was I love the outdoors, but the outdoor community from the outside looking in is very, atheist agnostic, I'll say, more worldly. Christianity doesn't always fit naturally in there. And so wanted to come into this space authentically. And so that was also a huge piece and a huge kind of pillar of why I'm doing what I'm doing, is giving a space for the Christians in the outdoor space. So fast forward to meeting my husband. So, it's not this like really cute lovey-dovey story. It's really kind of, I'll just say, I feel like the way that God has worked in my life is, it's kind of like a knock on the door, and then it's walking down a hallway and maybe going through another door, and that sort of thing. It's kind of like faithful obedience. Are you going to open the door? Are you going to walk down the hallway? And then are you going to open the next door? So on and so forth. And so I went to Yosemite. My best friend worked there every summer at a kids camp. I went to go visit her. That was the reason I was there, but I could only see her for like one day on the week-long trip that I was there. So I did a lot of adventuring by myself, which was not abnormal for me. I do a lot of adventuring by myself. That's just the nature of the beast. I grew up in the Midwest. I do not have a lot of, or at this point in time, I did not have a lot of friends that were outdoorsy, that were interested in that kind of stuff. And so I just did a lot of things alone. So I go to Yosemite National Park. I'm out hiking. I think this day specifically, I hiked to the top of Centennial Dome, which is just this big like 360 overlook in the park. Just absolutely stunning views, really easy hike, but really awesome reward to see the whole park. And so was up there. Since I was by myself, I had propped my camera up on a rock and was trying to take a picture of myself. And my husband now walked by, and he was like, "Hey, do you want me to take a picture for you?" And I was like, "No, thanks. It's okay." Like I was walking back to my camera and it was like already done. So I was like, "No, it's fine. I'm not going to inconvenience you." And then since it's a dome, 360 views, you kind of walk along the whole thing and you can go around the top of it. And so I'm walking around looking at all the views, and I like turn around this boulder and there he is again, except this time he has his camera out and he's taking a picture, and I almost walk into his picture. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And, really from there, he was with his best friend. They were on a road trip, and we just really hit it off. It was like, "Hey, how are you? Where are you guys from? What are you doing out here?" Just your normal like trail conversation. And I had kind of said, "Hey, I'm here by myself." And they were like, "Well, just come hang out with us for the rest of the day. Like, we're going to go here and then we're going to go here." And I was like, "Yeah." And then I was planning on going to get pizza here. And it was just like kind of from there on, we were the three amigos for our trip in Yosemite, and
How cool is that? Like,
yeah.
I mean, come on now.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy part is this was my first solo trip as a Christian. So I had just given my life to the Lord, like maybe 2 or 3 months earlier. And, switching from the view of, and I was, also in a season where I wasn't really looking to date anybody, wasn't really interested in, I was just kind of trying to figure out what that looked like for me in my life, new life, kind of thing. And so I was really nervous to go on this trip by myself, because in seasons past, I would have, like met a boy, hung out with him, like there would be some sort of like romantic, like, "Hey, I'm interested in you." It's like a trip fling, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody has ever experienced that, but
I'm sure they have
that was
in their own ways. Yes.
yeah. That was, I'm not going to say common, but kind of expected that as a single woman traveling, you're going to get hit on. And there was some fun in that, right? But I was like, I was really praying, like, "Lord, please do not. Like, I don't even want to be put in that situation. I'm in this new season of life. Like, I'm just not I don't want to get involved with anyone as I'm trying to figure out this new season of life. And so meet them and we're talking, and then all of a sudden they just start bringing up like God, and they're asking me questions about God and about my faith, and I'm like, I'll tell you as much as I know, but I'm like, was very honest. Like, I'm a really new Christian. And so we got to talk about some things that were really interesting. And, really, I think 4 days went by, and it was just like I had so much fun with him and his best friend. And there was not an ounce of, hey, I like you. There wasn't any of that. It was just like, this was just such a cool experience to meet these guys and to hang out with them and so on and so forth. And so we just stayed in touch. I was living in North Carolina at the time. They lived in Alabama. And I actually had to travel often to work to Nashville, which is about 2 hours north of where they lived in Alabama. And so we would just make it a priority for the three of us to hang out whenever I would go to Nashville. And so we just kept a relationship really over the next year and a half. And then, I'll just say, and then, things changed from there. But truly we met and it was just, we were friends. We just hit it off and enjoyed each other's company and personalities and just kind of clicked in that way. And then, so it's not this everyone, whenever I say that, they think like, oh my gosh, she was just like love at first sight on top of a mountain. It's like, no, but
looking back now, like you said earlier, hindsight's 2020. I mean, that was the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't deny that now, right? So, we could always look back at, we know the Lord has a plan for us. And most of the time we have to look back and go, yep, that lined up, this lined up. So obviously you guys are married, and this is something that I didn't know that you did until I listened to that show. You and your husband are, or were, I don't know what you call yourselves now, but I mean, at the time, you were true overlanders. So you guys got married, and then you have this truck, you're out overlanding. So walk us through that next phase.
Yeah, so we got married in 2020 in Loveland, near Loveland Pass, Colorado. So we kind of did a little elopement thing, but our families were there. And we lived in Nashville when we got married. We moved shortly after to Alabama, which is where he is from. That was a good season, but it was a hard season for us. We lived out in the middle of nowhere, just, was not really filling either of our cups. And so I had been in a season where I had lived in 7 states over the last 7 years. And I was like, I just really could use my community. And so we moved back to Kansas for a year, which is where I'm originally from. But we knew that we weren't going to stay there. We knew that whenever we got married, we wanted to live out west somewhere. That was kind of always the plan, always the thought. We loved the mountains. But we, at that point in time, could really live wherever. My husband, all he has to do for his job is be near an airport. I, at the time, also worked from home and needed to be near an airport. And so that was really the only criteria that we had, other than some things that we wanted. And so we were like, do we just pick a city? Do we move there? How do we make the right decision? And so I had kind of always wanted to do, the typical van life thing. And my husband was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. Keep in mind, we have 2 dogs, and my husband's 6'6", and so he's just like, I don't even know that I could stand up in a van, I want to be able to be comfortable. And he travels for his job, and he's just like, I don't want to come home and be traveling all the time. So we picked 5 cities that we thought would be a good fit for us. And so we went 2 months at a time and spent 2 months in 5 different cities last year. And then we had an Airbnb in all of those cities, but we did a lot of overlanding and would go out and adventure within a 2-hour radius of these cities to see, because we like a little bit more rural. We don't really love cities so much. And so it was where could we move? What's around? We also just wanted to make the most of the trip. And so I think we spent over 100 nights last year, in the truck camper or in the rooftop tent. And so
you guys have, what was that? It was a Toyota Tacoma?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We have a Toyota Tacoma with a quick pitch tent on top.
All right. And so
Yep.
you guys picked 5 cities, and
Yep.
then you obviously, I mean, you Airbnb it, and then in between time, you're out overlanding. I mean, 100 nights, that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot. May not be quite that many, but it was close. But it was, yeah, so we had the Airbnb more to, like, have as, like, a base camp, so we'd, like, come back, drop stuff, go somewhere else, like, we were kind of constantly on the go. It was a really fun year, but it was also pretty exhausting at the same time.
Well, what did you enjoy? Because that is like that's what everybody talks about. "Oh, man, I just wanna go live in my van," and, you know, I have a van, and it's convenient, um, but it's not glorious all the time. So, tell us kinda what did you learn from that experience doing that? The good, the bad.
Yeah, so we obviously ended up picking where we wanted to live through that process, so we're in Utah now, we landed there. But through that process, I would say that me and my husband are definitely very different. I am definitely more of the travel adventure. I can kind of go nonstop. He is definitely more of a homebody. And so we figured out that dynamic a little bit more, of, the break in between that and the, um, balancing of the scales, let's say, of that. And then I think for us, we loved it. It was great. I just don't think for us it was something we could do long term. I know there's people that do, and they can do it for forever and ever. I think we really enjoyed having a base camp. So it was like, if we don't want to go out and adventure today, like, we can just go to our Airbnb, and there was never that pressure to, like, keep going. So I think that was like a healthy piece of it for sure. I think that it, I don't want to say that it takes away from the adventure being out there all the time, but it's almost like every day is an adventure. And so the adventures maybe don't feel as special. Um, because, if you only get to go somewhere or go on vacation, a couple of times a year. So I think, anything, if you're around it long enough, kind of loses its like,
Yeah.
um, its glitter a little bit. I think the biggest thing that we struggled with is community and just not having, friends, or even if we made friends. I think one of the hardest part was, like, leaving people. It's like you go somewhere for 2 months and you get close with people, and then it's like, "Oh, yeah, bye," like, don't know when I'll see you again, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that was really, we were really excited to kind of have our own place, because moving Airbnbs and just kind of having to live out of boxes was a little challenging. At times, there was definitely times where I was like, "I want this, but it's in the storage unit back in Kansas," or whatever. And so there's good and bad in that, not having whatever you want available to you all the time. There's definitely definitely good in that. But yeah, just I think it definitely solidified what's important to us. And I think for us, that was having a church that we go to consistently and being able to, like, foster and build community somewhere and continuously. So, yeah.
I totally get it because I love going out and adventuring. I love coming home too. Um, I
Yeah.
love, my chair, my bed, all the things, right? Flushing water in the toilet. It's like, it is a fine balance. So,
It is.
spend your time in the outdoors, but then, for me, it's always good to come home as well. So that's why section hiking works for me. Go out for periods of time and then come home. So you've also navigated yourself somehow right to the John Muir Trail this past summer. So when you and I began talking, it was right before you were going out to hit the trail. So the John Muir Trail for me, and we kind of talked about this on your podcast as well, that was the beginning of my lowest points.
Yeah.
Um, had the full gamut, going to the John Muir Trail, gonna complete the 211 miles, gonna go climb Mount Whitney, and I made it 3 days. And that's still kinda on my shoulders right now, but that was the beginning of me getting, surgeries on my foot and really, coming back to the Lord where I should be. So the John Muir Trail it's that scale balance for me. It's okay, you didn't make it, but it's also okay, you're exactly where you're supposed to be right now.
Yeah.
But you, Kenzie, you did make it. You completed the entire 211 miles. So walk us through your journey on the John Muir Trail.
Yeah. So the John Muir Trail kind of pipe dream started the summer that I actually met my husband, which is really funny. I was in Yosemite. I think my friend that I was there visiting had just talked about her friend that just completed it, and I want to say that was the first time I had ever heard about it. And I don't know why. I don't know what. I don't know. I'm delusional, I guess. But I was like, the year I turned 30, I want to hike the John Muir Trail. Keep in mind, listeners, I had never been on a backpacking trip at this point. Okay.
I'm not laughing at you. I love it. I actually love it because sometimes it's when you go into it, well, this is what I'm going to do. You have more success.
Yeah, you do, because you have your mind made up. But yeah, so I said that. And how you say things to yourself all the time and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. And it's just like, yeah, no, you're not. But for whatever reason, this stuck. And my husband will tell you whenever we met, I told him about it. Whenever I met my good friend who did it with me the first day I met her, I was like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. And, it's interesting. I look back on it now, like I said, hindsight 2020, but I think that the Lord just knew where I was going to be, what I was going to need, in the journey that was in front of me long before I knew it, And so I say all that to say, I wasn't a backpacker and it was like, oh my gosh, I want to do this thing. It was like literally complete delusional. I had no idea what that even meant, to be honest, when I said I was going to do it. And so anyway, I took my first backpacking trip in 2019 into 2020. It was over New Year's, summited Mount Kenya in Africa. That was my first ever, I'm going to do air quotes, backpacking trip. In different countries, people might call it something different. And I didn't sleep in a tent. I slept in a hut. So is it truly
even
backpacking?
better. Yeah.
Is it truly backpacking? I call it backpacking without a
I said
tent.
yes.
But you can call it whatever you want. That was my introduction to hiking more than a day hike, and not coming home or sleeping in a bed or a hotel. It was like, you're continuing on a trail. And so, yeah, 2024 is the year I turned 30 and got the permits in I think February. And I had asked my friend Meg, I was like, I don't even know that I really ever asked her, but I was just like, hey, I'm doing this, kind of like, I'm looking for someone to maybe do it with, and it took her a while to commit to the journey, but I did end up doing it with my friend Meg. And we did it northbound. So we did it from Cottonwood Lakes, which is Horseshoe Meadows, about 25 miles south of Mount Whitney, and then finished in Yosemite Valley. So we did it kind of the opposite way that it was designed to be done, but you can do it either way. It just adds more miles if you go the way we went.
Yeah. So what dates did you go and how did you snag that permit?
Yeah. So I did, I tried for a couple weeks to do the lottery for the typical route, which, starting in Yosemite Valley, ending in Mount Whitney, but was not lucky enough to get those. It is a lottery system, whereas the ones going northbound are more like concert tickets. So you just you go to the website on 8 a.m. that the morning that you want to buy your permits, and then you type as fast as you can and you try to buy a sold out concerts. Um, and so that took I think about 7 days before I was successful. But I knew that I wanted to do it in September. I knew that I wanted to do it either last week of August or early September, just because it's less busy, less buggy, it's not as hot. And so I did know that. So I did, try to get those permits accordingly. And we started on September 3rd. And our route took us, I think, about 255 miles, I'm going to say. It depends on whether you're looking at which map you're looking at or if you're looking at Meg's watch, because Meg's watch told us we did like 3 more miles every day than we did. So she's like, I'm going off my watch. And I'm like, yeah, okay.
Go Meg. If it's on Strava, it's true, right?
Yes, exactly. And so, yeah, it took us about 20 days. We took 1 0 day at VVR, and
wow. Okay, not resupply, 0 day. Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, dang, you guys were carrying some food, but so you took 1 full 0 day.
Yeah, but we did only have 2 resupplies. So we carried 5 days for the first 5 days and then 7 and 7.
Wow. Okay, so walk us through. So you're going north. So in about 3 days, you're going up to the highest elevation in the lower 48 states. So walk us through this.
Yeah, so this was actually Meg's first backpacking trip. Was almost the same trek that we
All
took.
right, Kenzie, now y'all are getting crazy. So
no, I'm saying no. Her first backpacking trip that she ever went on was the same section of the trail.
Oh, okay, all right. I thought you were saying this was like, all right, now she's hitting the trail. Okay, all right.
No, we did meet some girls though that this was their first ever backpacking trip, and we met them going up Mount Whitney, and they were almost done, and it was wild, and they were almost like they had run out of food multiple times. They were hot mess expresses, but they did make it. So it is possible, people. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but
awesome.
They said they got lost like 20 times. I was like, yeah, that's good for you. But anyway, so Meg had already done this little section of the trail the first 3 days. And so, it's kind of fun because she's like, oh, I can't wait to get to Guitar Lake. And, that's one of her favorite places. And, there wasn't quite the mystery, that the rest of the trail had, because she had done that section. And so, what's funny is we're driving to the trailhead, and I just remember I was like, oh no. Like, I got really overwhelmed, and I was like, okay, like, it's here. Like, now I actually have to do it. And like, I don't know what that looks like. I've never done anything this long. I think my longest backpacking trip up until this point was, let's call it 65 or 70 miles. Let's say 5 days, and this was going to be a 20-day adventure. And so kind of had this moment of like, can I do this? Am I capable of doing this? And got really overwhelmed at the journey that was in front of me. And one thing that I told Meg and my husband, and especially Meg, because she was going to be with me, I was like, I just, whatever I do, I cannot think about the whole journey. I have to think about just the day that's in front of me, because the whole thing seemed daunting. Like, how am I ever going to make it? And it was really funny because on day 2, what did I do? I immediately was like, your backpack's settling in. You're already at over 11,000 feet. Not easy by any means. Like, no part of this trail, let's say, was easy. But it was like, man, if I'm struggling now, like, how am I going to make it 19 more days? And I remember I was like, I'm done. I don't want to be here. Like, I don't know if I can do this. And I was really doubting myself. That was day 2. But then, it's funny is the minute I sat down my pack for the day, I was like, this is great. I'm so excited for tomorrow. Like, let's rock and roll, baby. And so, yeah, so we woke up at like 3:30 the morning we were going to summit Mount Whitney, and saw an amazing sunrise, and did that. And then that was also like a really important moment being on the top of Mount Whitney, because that was the true start for us of the John Muir Trail. So
Yeah, so you get to the top of Mount Whitney, and then, now you're starting your 211 miles journey, I guess, north to Yosemite National Park. And, then I guess the next thing would be, what is it, Kearsarge Pass? Is that the next, huge pass everybody thinks about? Is that it? I can't remember.
Forrester.
Or Forrester, that's it. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So Forrester was funny because there was rain and thunder behind us. But as long as we kept moving, it kept the same distance behind us. And so we're kind of very safely, it was far enough, but it was kind of funny because it was like a race of okay, we have to keep moving up this pass because we've got to get up and over it. But, you could see the weather coming in behind us. And so the thunder held off and the storm didn't catch up until we were about maybe a mile to half a mile from the bottom of the pass into tree line. And so then the thunder cracks and we're sprinting to tree line at that point. But that was a fun pass because there was a sense of urgency, to make it, which wasn't most of the trail. I think you're not always, you don't find that urgency, but it was like, the storm is right behind us and we're either going to be stuck in it if we sit and we wait, or we can just keep pushing forward. And so I think having that little boost of motivation going up Forrester Pass was definitely helpful to keep moving and move with gusto.
Forrester Pass still scares me, and I was totally scared of passes. My first, my monumental 3 days on the John Muir Trail, my first pass, I can't even remember the name of it. Donahue. So, on the East Coast, you've got the Green Tunnel, so you really don't see, the Bald Mountains or anything like that for miles and miles and miles. And you just go up over the mountain and down, and it's no big deal, right? So these passes, I just had in my mind, because they look like little keyholes, because you can see them forever and ever, right? So you feel like you're going to get to the top and you're going to have to boulder, through these keyholes. And that's what I had in my mind. And so the whole time I'm climbing Donahue Pass, I'm like, this isn't even the worst of it. The worst of it is, how am I going to get through to the other side? That seems so now that I've been over a pass, I understand the nature of going over a pass. And when we got to the top of Donahue Pass, I was like, oh my God, I had built this whole story of all these horrible things that were going to happen to me. And it really affected, how I was performing athletically, if that's the way you want to put it. It affected my breathing. It affected my ability to move. So, you had gone over Whitney. So what's, it's just kind of, oh, okay, I understand what's going to happen now, through until I get to Yosemite. So was that your idea of a pass, or maybe you're more in tune to the West Coast than I am at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely knew what that meant, and I had, I was the planner and the prepper of this trip, and so I had done, a good bit of research and watched, all the YouTube videos and all the things, and so had an idea. But it's funny sitting back looking at a pass, because you said you can see where you're going and it's like this keyhole. I sat there and I was like, where? Where is the trail? Where do we go? Because if you're sitting back looking at it, sometimes it takes the most odd route. And then it's you think that it's this little keyhole, and no, it's actually way over here. And it was just interesting to think you know where you're going and then have a complete plot twist in that. But you just stay on the
that's a
trail.
good way to put it, like a plot twist. Yeah, you're right. Because I would see the keyhole and I'm like, oh my God, it's moved. Now it's over here. How in the world am I going to get over there? And it's it's like your faith. Trust the process, right? Hundreds of people have gone, animals are going, pack mules are going up this trail. So, just kind of trust the process. And, in hiking, and, it's almost like you put a fear on yourself that's not necessary. And, we do that in life too. We put a fear on ourselves. I put a fear on myself. Oh, you can't talk about your faith. People will make fun of you. No one will listen to your podcast. And that's
Yeah,
not really what
so
happens.
true.
Yeah. Yeah. So round out the trip
Well,
for us. So, oh, go ahead. I think you had a thought there.
I was just gonna say, to me, the passes felt like a little bit like life. And I think someone said this on my podcast recently, and it's like just stuck with me. It said, "What's true on the trail is true in life." And it's like, I couldn't see the trail in front of me going up these passes. I had no idea where it was going, but I didn't need to know that information yet. I just needed to stay faithful on the steps that were in front of me and the part of the section that I could see, and you'll get there. And so I think so often we like try so hard to like see way too far in front of us. And it's like, just keep your eyes within this like 1 mile block. Don't focus on the next, 3 miles or whatever. But I think that that's valuable for me, at least.
Oh, no, that I love that. I love that. And I was just sitting here as you were saying that, you know, we're supposed to give all of our troubles to God, right? So even our troubles on the trail, when our pack is bothering us or we don't know the way or, whatever is happening. And when you were saying that, I was just thinking, why do we keep our troubles when we're not supposed to? Because we want to solve things, right? Like we're chronically wanting to solve. And one thing you're not going to solve is moving the trail. So
Well,
so I love that, how whoever said that on your show, put that together. So here you are, very successful in completing, the John Muir Trail. So wrap it up for us now as far as completing the trail, looking back at your success, how was God talking to you on the trail? Kinda give us a synopsis of that.
yeah. So one of the things that I did right before I left was I wrote a verse on my backpack, which was Romans 12:12, and it says, "Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, and be constant in prayer." And for me, I think that that was really important just because there are going to be tribulations, and it's just like, be patient. So like we had that verse came in super, super valuable. We were sitting at VBR, taking our 0 day, and there was a huge winter storm coming in. We weren't sure if we should leave the next day. We weren't sure, what we should do. Everyone was bailing on trail. Like, I mean, literally so many people left the trail that day, not sure what to do. And called one of my good friends back in Utah who was a guide for a long time and just, has a lot of different outdoor experience than I do. And so it's just like, what would you do? And it was just like one of those moments of like, just wait and see what happens. Like you're not going to be behind. You can still, make up the distance on the end if you do have to wait a day, but it's just like, just go to sleep and deal with it tomorrow when the storm was supposed to hit, see what's going to happen. And so I think just being patient a moment and just like not making a rash decision, not, having to leave the trail or be scared or go and like put ourselves in a dangerous situation. We just waited. And I think for me, that's something I have a really hard time with. And so I think that was like a big lesson that I was taught was sometimes it's okay to just wait and not take a step. Um, and so I say that very lightly though, because I think so often people get stuck there,
Mhm.
And so it is important at some point to make that step. But I think that there is beauty in being patient. And that was a big thing. And then, really for me, I think that kind of a word that I've set for the year of this year, which I knew I was doing the John Muir Trail this year, but I didn't quite know how these two things would go together. But my word for the year was patient endurance. And for me, I just feel like that was this trip was such a testament of that. And like, life, just like the trail, requires perseverance. There were days, people I think glorify through hiking and they glorify, trips. And it's like, yes, there are beautiful things and it is 100% worth it. But that doesn't mean that every minute is fun and enjoyable and that it's not hard, you know? And so I think that it's just a good reminder to like whenever life gets hard or whenever things are hard, it's just like, just keep going. Like, there's beauty in this. And I was just so grateful, honestly, to be out there. I've been in a season the past year where I have been, I also call myself a self-recovering success junkie. And so for a long time, I just cared about success. I cared about making a certain amount of money, about having a title, about, so many things. And in the last year, I have not had a corporate full-time career like, normal. I have been, just really focused on loving people and being present in the things that I'm doing, and have been in a blessed place to not have to worry about some of those things, and have actually healed through a lot of that lifestyle. And I just think that I kind of forgot where I was going with that, but um, I just think that I was just so grateful to be here, because a year ago, or over a year ago, I would have had to quit my job to do this. You
Yeah.
know, I don't know that I would have been able to take 20 days, to go and do something like this. And so to just have this opportunity, and to have this opportunity to really, for me, focus on what's important. I think that the trail really taught me, like, today's worries are today's worries, and like tomorrow will worry about itself. And that's like, we know that, and we've heard that 1,000 times, like, scripturally. But being on the trail actually puts that into perspective and actually shows you what that looks like. Because I think that so often we can just get caught up in all the things of this
Yeah.
world. And we live, man, I mean, this is a whole nother podcast, but we live at a place that we were never designed to live.
Well, no, we
And,
could just keep going. I mean, just keep going. Yeah.
well, but what I was going to say about that is I've actually had a really hard time talking about the John Muir Trail with people, because my brain truly, 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 this is the way me and Meg have both talked about this. It almost seems like it doesn't happen. Like it didn't happen. And I think that's because it is so drastically different than what our lives look like normally, that our brain almost like can't process it, or makes it seem like it was a dream and that it didn't actually happen. And so it's just like, man, we've gotten so far from focusing on what's in front of us, and we're just constantly distracted. And it was, such a good, and like I said, I'm just so grateful to be able to have had that opportunity to be able to go, because I know not everybody does. But um, I just think it was really helpful for me to focus on what's in front of me. And yeah, I just think we got to do that. Like, I think we're just so distracted in
I,
life. And
you
so,
know, I'm right there with you. And again, I cannot remember if I said this on your episode or not, but another thing that I've been kind of struggling with this year, and you talking about what you just said, is, and I almost bring this up on a daily basis. Um, what is it in me that really enjoys going out hiking? What is it that I truly, what is driving me to get out there? And 100% when you are on the trail, for me, that is, it's all the things. That's when you're closest to nature. That is, when you feel, for me, most alive. And for me, it's not about the gear. It's not, I'm not a gearhead. I could care less about that. Um, it's not even about, the trail I'm on, but when I was injured and could not be on the trail, this past year, I started to realize, for me, hiking, you're hours and hours with God if you want to be. You're alone on the trail. If you're hiking, 13, 14, 15 miles a day, you're all day, communing with what God created. And it took me this year to finally realize that's what I miss. Hours of listening to hymns on the trail. Like, I love listening to old hymns while I'm hiking. And it could be musical only, it could be people singing. And when I was injured, I didn't have that. And I was like, there's something missing. And I think I got so angry, but I couldn't figure out what I was missing. And now that, the Lord slapped me beside the head, hey, listen, duh, this is what
Sometimes we need.
and then it all goes by so quickly. This summer, I was able to spend, many, many over 50 days out on the trail. And every single day, whether I was doing a 5-mile day, a 10-mile day, it didn't matter. I just wanted to make sure that, I had that time where I'm quiet, I'm listening to songs, nothing's bothering me. It's kind of like a reset. And that's what hiking is for me. And it took me this year to kind of really figure that out. It's a time for me to go out and just kind of be with God, really. And I mean, there's
Yeah.
no other way to put it.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
wanna go out and test gear. I don't wanna go out and, show off new outfits. Like, I don't care about that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's so much beauty in just solitude, silence, and then whatever's in front of you, just being like 100% present. I think that's where the trail, is so important is, you are present there and you're present with the people that you're with. And it's not like, oh, we got a timeline, like we only have 2 hours to hang out and, catch up and whatever. And it's kind of like you have set aside time to be here, and it's kind of like you're here until that clock runs out. But I think it's just, yeah, it's amazing what even an hour of silence can do for your brain in today's world. Like, take being off the trail. I mean, obviously that's great, but take being off the trail out of the equation. Even if you were to just sit at your house in silence, no podcast, no music, no nothing, like, it's wild. And like, that's a place I think that we need to get a little bit more comfortable being, is in silence. And so I know that's important for me, being in the outdoors.
Yeah, and I remember years and years ago, before social media, I never went hiking with music. I never, carried it. And now I have to force myself, okay, don't listen to anything. Don't, listen to a podcast. You don't need noise in your ear. And it's amazing, just the transitions.
Yeah.
Because we all want to be entertained. We have it at our fingertips.
Yeah. Well, and this isn't a Christian resource, but if you don't believe anything that we're saying, go and read or listen to the book, The 12-Hour Walk. And that will tell you all that you need to know about what we're talking about and just what happens in your mind and all the things. It's really interesting.
Okay, so I have to do that too now. Just when I said I'm gonna go silent. The 12-hour walk. Okay. You've intrigued me. So
Yeah. It's about a guy who, short form, it's about a guy who walked across Antarctica, and his goal was to walk 12 hours every day, and it was in complete silence. And he just talks about the things that happen in your brain, and you're able to think past all of your limiting beliefs. You're able to think past, like, you just go into a lot deeper space. And so it's a challenge that you can do anywhere in the world. You just go and you walk. It doesn't matter if you walk 1 mile or 100 miles. The goal is just to be in complete silence for 12 hours and be undistracted. And it's great. I did it last year and it was life-changing. And yeah, it's not, like I said, it's not really a spiritual thing. So if you are a Christian, look at it with some discerning eyes, some of the things in the book. But I'd say overall, it's a really great concept.
Well, listen, Kenzie, I truly feel like you and we could just bring up another topic and start talking about it and go more into depth. But I do want to be cognizant of your time. And yeah, so tell everybody where they can find you. I know you're on Instagram and you recently changed your Instagram handle. So talk to us about that for a couple minutes.
Yeah, so I am now pretty much, I think, everywhere you could find me. I am Messages from the Mountain. So that is on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel, and my podcast is My Valley, His Victory. I had a blog called Messages from the Mountain, and it was all about things that are imagery, I guess is the right word, imagery of things in our walk with God, but in the outdoors. And so I would find things on the trail or find things out in nature that kind of like almost like little devotionals or, things like that. And so that was my very first step into kind of talking about the outdoors and Christianity. And my Instagram name was Kenzie from Kansas, but I just kind of want to put a little bit more of God in the outdoors in everything that I'm doing. And so I just, changed everything to that name. And now I can be free to talk about whatever I want on my Instagram. Not that I couldn't before, but just putting a little bit more name to behind what I'm doing. And yeah, so hopefully it can be things about trips, about gear, but it can also be things that I'm learning out in nature from God. And it's kind of just an all-encompassing name for all the things that I'm doing.
I think it's great. So everybody needs to go over. I will make sure everything is in the description, show notes, whatever you want to call it. But most definitely go ahead and head over to your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the things, and check out My Valley, His Victory. And let's just close out, give the listeners a glimpse of what they can expect on your show.
Yeah. So you are going to meet everyday Christians who love the outdoors. I don't focus on, having anybody that you would maybe necessarily know. I have had a few bigger names, but that is not my intention. My intention is people that you don't necessarily know, just your everyday common folks that you can relate to on there. We talk about how the outdoors plays a role in our relationship with God. They share stories about ways God has spoke to them in nature and being outdoors. And then they talk about a valley or a season of wilderness that they went through and what God taught them or prepared them for in that season. So we talk about everything from navigating dating and depression and anxiety to really, really, really big topics like cancer and losing a child and some really hard, really, really, really hard topics and everything in between. And so my goal with that is just for people that are walking through a similar season to be encouraged and to see that, God turned something horrible for good.
Well, I truly enjoy your show. Thank you for having me on your show. And for some reason, I feel like this is not the last time that you and I are going to connect. So I truly appreciate you being on here. And y'all, please go follow Kenzie. There is more to her story, and I'm sure more to come as we round out 2024 and head into 2025. So I will close out like I always do. Truly appreciate you, Kenzie. Everybody, thanks for listening. Be safe out there and happy section hiking.
Bye.
Awesome. All right.